Hey everyone, it's Deflating Atheism here, and I have a special guest, kind of veteran YouTube Christian apologist, inspiring philosophy. For those of the viewers who don't know who you are, would you mind explaining who you are and what you do, and when and why you decided to do what you do?
All right, yeah. Well, I guess I am a veteran now. I guess I've been at it for a couple of years.
It creeps
I
up.
never, I still feel like I'm new to it though. It's time flies. Well, I started my channel at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012. I just wanted to offer some Christian responses to some things I remember hearing a lot of atheists saying on the internet. My original plan was to do like 13 videos or so.
Yeah.
But then I decided to do some more, and then decided I need to do a couple more. So eventually I decided I'm going to do something called the apologetic video library. That's where my goal is to eventually have a video for every apologetic question out there. And that's currently what we're trying to build on my channel.
Excellent, excellent. I was actually honestly under the impression that your channel was much older than that, just because I remember you just being involved in all these debates with various YouTube atheists. So the kind of YouTube atheist bully brigade was already well established by the time you got on the scene.
Oh yeah, it's died down since then actually. They've kind of moved on to more of like they're dealing with it's like the feminist anti-feminist argument, and
Yeah.
they seem to have split up in the different groups and they're just going at each other, which I think is fantastic because they've been distracted with that. And the group I'm in, like the idealists and the Christian idealists, we've had a lot of time to sort of like build up popularity, and we've actually converted a lot of people. If you go to my testimonial page on my website, that's like a small sampling of people I've heard from who've changed their views or become a Christian because of some of my videos. So yeah, it's kind of happy that died down because it's allowed us to kind of focus in on what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and also there's the fact that there, in recent years, there have been like a lot of strange bedfellows along the whole sort of ideological political spectrum. Now, I think a lot of atheists who actually find themselves fighting along, shoulder by shoulder to shoulder with some Christians, who are similarly opposed to their kind of what they see as political threats.
Yeah, I stay out of politics, so that's not
Yeah,
me.
I don't blame you for that. I don't blame you for
That is, if you think apologetics is mudslinging, you have seen nothing yet.
that one. Well, yeah, religion and politics is what you do not discuss in mixed company. Uh, yeah, so things have changed, and Max and I talk about this, is that there is not the I remember, like, even before I even had the idea of starting a channel of my own, I would look at like Christian videos, like the kind of videos that someone like you or a Cartesian theist, and we can talk about him later. But it's like they would always be downvoted by like a 10-1 margin, and that the whole kind of thumb bot brigade does not operate that way anymore.
Yeah, there was. I remember one atheist who was sympathetic to my channel termed it the strategic down thumbing campaign.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen atheists even admit that they all have sock puppet accounts that they use to downvote videos, but I don't know, their hearts their hearts not in it anymore, I don't think.
No, they moved on to others. I think one of the big things you need to remember is back early on, like before 2010, around that time, the big debate that was going on in this community, at least, was between the young Earth creationists and the atheists.
Mm-hmm.
And when the young Earth creationists finally retreated back into like their circular arguments and whatnot, remember Venom Fang X and
Yes.
that stuff? Well, I mean, then they kind of just got bored with it. I mean, they dealt with like they dealt with a lot of apologists of William Lane Craig for a while, but then they eventually just kind of backed into now they're doing the whole feminist, anti-feminist argument thing going on. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think for a lot of them they equated Christianity with young Earth creationism.
Oh, a lot of them still do.
Yeah. And I think even William Lane Craig, I mean, I hear so many of them call William Lane Craig a young Earth creationist, which is obviously not true.
Yeah, they've not looked into it enough to really know what he believes and what he says on the issue.
Yeah, yeah. So you you're an idealist, and I have kind of mixed feelings about that, quite honestly. Not because it isn't true. I'm always just kind of ambivalent about what's the best means of persuasion. And so, like, Johanan tried to recruit me into quantum idealism. And I'm like, dude, I'd be way out of my depth there. You know, I don't want to offer an opinion on something I don't feel qualified to speak of.
Him and I actually disagree on that. He's a quantum idealist. I call myself a dual aspect idealist, and I don't agree with him on that.
Okay. Well, you could explain that and kind of explain why you think that is an effective kind of defense of the Christian faith.
Well, dual aspect idealism is just substance dualism, except it just is, instead of it being substances, it's just different aspects of mind. So you would have mind, and then matter would just be information that is contingent upon mind. The difference between Johanan and I is Johanan tries to say that consciousness is sort of reduced to perceptions or information, or you know, if you're going to go off what David or what Stuart Hameroff says, it reduces to actual quantum collapse. And I would say that's just a reductionist view. I affirm consciousness is fundamental, and it cannot be reduced to smaller integrated information or, you know, perceptions or whatnot. So I would say consciousness is fundamental, and then matter would just be an information construct contingent upon consciousness or mind.
Yes, but still real.
Real, yeah, it's definitely real. It's objective. There's an objective, you know, material construct we live in. And the analogy I always use is in a video game. Obviously, the video game, the virtual world is contingent upon the underlying code.
Yeah.
So it's sort of built along the same lines of that analogy. It's like the underlying code is sort of like our consciousness, analogous to our consciousness, and then the virtual world would be the material reality kind of thing. But that's all one substance, we would say.
Yeah.
That's all, you know, so that would be, so I wouldn't say what substance dualists say that it's two substances. I would say it's just one, and they're just different aspects of the one substance.
Okay.
So, I mean, I agree with substance dualists on a lot of things. It's just on the underlying ontological description of reality. That's where I just kind of disagree on the, it's on the epistemic value of it, I guess you should say.
Yes. Yeah. Let me ask you a question that I think I kind of try to ask everyone. I think it's kind of good to have like a cookie cutter question that you just ask everyone, whether they're atheist or theist or some flavor thereof. Where do you see the discussion going in the years to come? How do you see popular opinion kind of turning, and how do you see the kind of debate on things like YouTube turning?
I don't know. I think the theist-atheist argument will pick up again. How it will pick up, I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, you kind of put out there.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I think the theist-atheist argument will pick up again. I'm not sure how it'll play out. I don't think young Earth creationism will ever really come back the way it did with like Venom Fang X or some of those other people who were trying to support him. I don't know. I mean, I would have never predicted a lot of the stuff that happens on YouTube now.
Yeah.
What I'd like to see is us a more theist-atheist argument around idealism, the quantum arguments we've presented, the digital physics argument, the cosmic conscious argument, the introspective argument. I'm also going to be presenting an argument in June where I'm going to argue specifically against neo-Darwinism and argue for a different theory of evolution called process structuralism, or as most people seem to refer to it as just structuralism. So I'd like to see if a debate around that, because I'm going to try to use a lot of the arguments that atheists have used in the past to argue for evolution and say this is actually not really supporting your side in the neo-Darwinian framework. So I'd like to see more of an argument around a lot of the the stuff coming out in quantum physics, cosmology, and structuralism. So that's where I'd like to see, but who knows where it could go? It could be a totally different landscape in a year. You never know what could happen.
Okay. So I mean, but do you have a strong feeling about that? I mean, the way you see the pieces are being moved on the board. Do you? What I'm asking you is like, do you see like a huge retreat of new atheism or something?
Or, well, that's already definitely kind of happening. I mean, with one of the big things you see with a lot of new atheists is the Christ mythers, and they are, I don't even know why they're still around. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
When Bart Ehrman is coming out and saying, you look foolish if you say Jesus didn't exist. I mean, that's pretty bad. And Richard Dawkins has had to back up on some of this stuff when he first made some of these assertions. So
in the God delusion, no less. Yes.
yeah, so I mean, you're seeing a little bit of that now.
Yeah.
You know, and the militant atheism, the
Do
new
not
atheism.
do not underestimate their ability just to double down.
Well, they will. I mean, they always do. The one thing you got to remember is it's built on an underlying premise that religion is harmful to society.
Yeah.
And they have to defeat it in order to save society. Well, dozens upon dozens of peer-reviewed meta-analysis studies on religion show that is not the case. In fact, the opposite is true. So, I mean, in a month, I might be debating someone on that. I'm not sure if I can say who it is yet, but it's a pretty popular atheist if it happens. And I'm going to debate him on that. And I'm just going to bring out the studies. I mean, what else do I need to say?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things. And if once they start to realize that religion is not as harmful as they pretend that it to be, why would they be so angry that it exists if it's actually beneficial for society, as multiple studies have shown? I mean, I cited a bunch in my video titled "Is Christianity Evil?"
Yeah. And they will very casually throw around the accusation that bringing up a child in a religious environment is child abuse. They don't seem to properly appreciate what a severe accusation that is.
No, that's a pretty bold claim. I mean, that has devastating consequences if that was actually carried out in the political realm. Because I mean, thank God it hasn't. That no politician has tried to say that, because who knows what they could do with that. But that's a very dangerous thing to say. And again, there's no scientific evidence to really support that. There have been studies which have shown that that's in religious families, like for example, there was a study a couple of years ago that said that children in non-religious families are nicer than children in religious families. The margin of error, the margin of error was, the variable between Christians and non-religious was in the margin of error. And there have been,
and the sample size was 1,000. So,
well, I mean, that's a pretty nice sample size. Don't get me wrong. I've seen other ones who try to, study.
Can I just explain this for the viewers? The methodology is that they gave the children stickers.
Yeah, you can go on, but I was going to say, go ahead.
Okay, and then they asked the children to share the stickers, and as IP said, it was like within the margin of error. The children brought up in the religious households were incrementally less willing to share their stickers. So they took this little study and extrapolated out, and it was plastered across headlines across the world that religious people are less charitable than non-religious people.
And that's bull, because there's also been a plethora of other studies which show religion is very beneficial.
In real terms, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's been dozens of studies which go against that idea. And the statistical data still shows that, Christians donate more time to charity, they give more to charity across the board.
Yeah.
So that's
not rich
just
or poor or urban or rural, or any way you slice and dice it.
And that's based on per capita as well. So, I mean, I hope to go over this, and I hope to actually have that debate next month, but we'll see if it happens.
So, can you explain to us briefly what this structuralism is?
So, structuralism is a theory of evolution. There's something that's often missed, because most of the time when we hear of evolution, we're trying to address people who don't believe in evolution. So you don't actually hear this, but actually in the scientific literature, there is no such thing as the theory of evolution.
Mm-hmm.
There are theories, plural, of evolution. There are dozens of different theories, and they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, you can hold the different theories of evolution, because what they're basically saying is, you're saying that life can evolve from this mechanism. So, there are different theories on how evolution can happen. Like today, neo-Lamarckian evolution is pretty big, and that's just epigenetics or horizontal gene transfer, things. So that's a theory of evolution that goes along with just simple Darwinian natural selection, or neo-Darwinian evolution, which just says there's variation in gene frequencies. I hold to a theory called process structuralism. And that basically, we agree that adaptation happens. We agree there's variation in gene frequency, but we don't think that's the main driving force of evolution. Clearly it plays a role, clearly it's a mechanism, but it's not the main driving force. What we would say is that there's something called process structuralism, and that is the theory that the kinds and types of organisms that we see, their body plans and the many traits, are the result of natural laws, rather than merely being the byproduct of historical contingency and chance genetic mutation. And we draw upon evidence from evo-devo research and self-assembly processes. So a lot of evidence is coming out that a lot of processes in chemistry and biology are products of self-assembly. So they're just sort of self-organizing in certain ways. And you see this with protein folds or micelles and all sorts of other examples.
Now you're speaking obviously way beyond my expertise, but would this help like explain things like convergent evolution, why animals from different families kind of acquire similar traits?
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the main pieces of evidence for it. So what we argue is that there's underlying natural laws, which life is just a natural result of them. So life was just not here by chance. It's just the right chemicals were in the right place at one time and we got lucky. It's the idea that nature is fine-tuned to bring about life as we know it, and certain morphological structures. That's why we see so much convergence in evolution. So that's the basic argument, is that the universe is just designed per se in a way to bring about life as we know it. So if you rewind the clock back to zero and start it over, you would get human life again or something similar. And if you try to keep doing it over and over, the same basic results within some variation would happen.
Yeah.
So that's the basic idea of structuralism. It's sort of like a partner to the fine-tuning argument in a sense, because fine-tuning argument says the universe is fine-tuned for life. Structuralism says chemistry and biology is fine-tuned to produce life, and specifically, eventually, intelligent human life.
Yeah, well, that seems to be the thing with atheists, is that they take the proximate explanation and say, voila, no God needed, when they ignore all the fine-tuning that had to be established to get that process that results in what we see.
Yeah, and it's not going to help their argument in the long run, because it doesn't show we're here by chance. It shows we're here because the universe meant for us to be here, in a sense. Like, it's sort of like the periodic table. The periodic table is a natural result of the universe. It's just these elements come about just by the natural physical laws. We argue life itself is sort of like that. It's just a natural result of the laws. In fact, some have argued that, for example, protein folds should be treated like a periodic table. There's about 1,000 basic protein folds, and they're a result of natural law.
Okay. Again, I'm speaking way outside of the compass of my non-existent expertise here. Yeah. But I know the popular press has been having a field day with Jeremy England.
Yeah, there was that's what's funny, is that he's actually an Orthodox Jew and a very devout one at that, and people were posting like articles saying that he's removing the need for the existence of God, and I'm gonna argue that would be compatible with theism and without theism, because if God created the universe to produce life, we would obviously find natural laws that are designed to bring about life, if theism is true. So why would that somehow be against theism?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the atheists are arguing against a straw man where every theist must believe that kind of God suspends the world in being just through a continuous act of just kind of extraordinary providence. Like, everything is a miracle, and we can't try to determine any sort of natural laws that govern the whole thing.
No, and it's ridiculous, because even the early church fathers said natural laws are the manifestation of God's will. So why can't he not use natural laws if he's supposedly the creator of the universe?
Exactly. So yeah, there was something I wanted to get back to, but I'm going to ask a question here. I kind of know what you're going to say, because basically every Christian apologist I ask gives the same answer. But if I were to ask you what you think is the strongest argument the atheists have, what would you say?
Well, I don't know. I don't really think they have strong arguments as it is. I mean, the one they use all the time is the problem of evil.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah, but I mean, even Matt Dillhunty has posted videos posting that this is not necessarily the best argument for atheists to use.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's a lot of, I mean, a lot of atheist philosophers have written a lot on it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's just that there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot of literature on how this is supposed to rectify with the existence of God. And I'll probably do a video on that next time January rolls around. But I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess I'd have to get actually into the actual argument before we started talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not. My problem was I think a lot of Christian apologists just say, oh well, there's no logical reason to believe that an omnibenevolent God can coexist with evil, and then just kind of dust their hands off and call it a day. I think that kind of ignores the force of the argument, which is emotional.
Well, it is. It's emotional at that, and you have to remember they're not actually arguing necessarily for atheism. They're arguing against the existence of God, using evil to argue against the existence of God. As specific arguments for atheism, I don't know what they would actually have for that, because you'd have to argue for naturalism or materialism or panpsychism or whatever the atheist actually is holding to.
Yeah, well, yeah, the problem with evil argues against an all good God, I suppose. Although that kind of opens a whole other can of worms.
Well, yeah, we have to be, if you were said what's the best argument atheists use against what I thought you said, what's the best argument atheists use for atheism? So I think I may have just misheard you.
Well, I don't really understand the difference there myself.
Well, I mean, when you argue the problem of evil, you're not arguing. You're arguing against a positive claim by theists. So it's an argument used to sort of just attack theism. It's sort of like an anti-theist argument instead of like an argument in favor of atheism, I guess you could say. So, I mean, that may just be like sort of like an epistemic distinction I'm making there.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, it's kind of an important point. I just got to note that, I guess.
Okay. Well, yeah, I take it. Well, you have the law of the excluded middle, so you can.
True. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I'd say that's probably the argument they most primarily use. But I need to eventually start getting ready around to doing a video on that. So hopefully I'll get to it probably by the beginning of next year.
Okay. How have you noticed, like in your time, even though your channel is only 7 years old, you are kind of a veteran. How do you think things have changed, even just up to the present, with just Christian apologetics and atheists? Because I see with what I see is kind of a very delayed response. I see on Facebook with some of these kind of newer pages that are popping up, is that the Christians seem to have gotten very kind of memey and sardonic with a lot of what they do, which I think has been like a long time coming,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I think it's good. I mean, that memes are now all the rave now, so everyone's doing memes, I guess.
Yeah. And so, I mean, my thing is that arguments are great. Obviously, arguments are essential. Arguments can't be the whole thing, because I seriously don't think arguments are whatever got the vast majority of atheists into atheism to begin with.
No, I mean, it's different for every person, though. We have to remember that. So it's hard to really just say, say it's just one variable. It's just a couple variables. It's going to be different for every person.
Yeah, I mean, I have great respect for people who could just be the shining light of God's love and just convert people from atheism that way. I've seen it happen with my own eyes. That's one way to get people. I mean, there's also just you can be kind of snotty and just kind of understand that not everyone is governed by rational forces. And
well,
so
yeah.
Arguments, but you also need to kind of take the wind out of their sails if what they're putting forward is this position that they are the iconoclast and they are the contrarians. And so you can rib them a little on that thing and say, being an atheist doesn't even make you a contrarian or an iconoclast.
Yeah, it's also interesting that they always are referring to themselves as the rational or the reasonable side, like, Rational Wiki, for example. And it's run by a bunch of Christ-mythers, for crying out loud.
Yes.
It's like, what? Like, this is not, this is rejected. There's like, I think Richard Carrier posted recently, there's 8 Christ-Smither scholars now. I'm like, oh, wow. A whole 8 out of tens of thousands of historians
Yeah,
across the world. There's 8.
I think 6 of them published just on Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, this is ridiculous. Why? And yet, if you go read Rational Wiki, they have all these arguments for why we have to doubt the existence of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at it recently because I'm going to be debating someone on Friday, Godless Engineer, on the existence of Jesus. So that'll be fun.
Can I put money on this?
And it's funny. I've been researching this for a while.
Can I bet on this like a boxing match or something?
Sure. I've been researching this for a while now. I just haven't had time to do videos, so I'm going to throw out a lot of the research I've been looking into for a couple months now, but I need to watch some more of his videos. But I know in one video, that's what he cited was Rational Wiki. He was talking about Tacitus. He's like, go look at Rational Wiki. It tells you why we can't trust this passage in Tacitus. And I'm like, first of all, they just cite like Richard Carrier and one other Christ-Smither, and then they cite Remsburg from 1909. And I'm like, Remsburg? Really? Like, what scholar takes him serious today? So
it's the guy who listed out all the contemporaneous authors who failed to mention Jesus.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. And it's like some of these people were writing like reports on like agriculture. It's like they're not gonna mention. It's like why didn't Richard Dawkins ever mention the existence of Herbert Hoover? He clearly doesn't think Herbert Hoover ever existed.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much about your debate with Godless Engineer because I don't want to kick a man when he's down, you know. What's hilarious is like you have like the Mythicist Milwaukee groups and say, oh, well, we're gonna have Richard Carrier here to speak. It's like if you're truly just like these open-minded skeptics, why don't you bring on a scholar who's going to challenge your beliefs rather than the scholar who's just going to tell you what you already want to believe? If you were truly weighing all the evidence, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. I've listened to their show a couple times, but I mean, like, there was one show they did where they had an archaeologist on. And they were debunking Mormonism archaeology, which I agreed with. So I was in for most of the show. And then at the end, they just made the statement like, there's no evidence the Jews ever built the pyramids. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you read the Bible, you'll know that as well. Because the Bible never even says the word pyramid.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, the one thing is a lot of people do this on both sides. And Christ-Smithers are a good example. But, you know, there's also Christians that do it, is that they just put themselves in an echo chamber. And they never read any other side. I encourage a book for both Christians and non-Christians to read is by Gerd Ludemann, you know, the resurrection of Jesus, an historical inquiry. It's a great book. I mean, I don't agree with his conclusions, but I mean, he goes over a lot of different factors. He puts forward his theory of how he tries to explain the resurrection. It's a very good book, and, you know, people have to do their best to try to examine both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
You just can't get in your little crowd and say, well, this is truth. And that's what Bart Ehrman was saying in that little clip that went viral for a while. Was like, I know it's really popular in the little Christ-Smither groups to say Jesus didn't exist, but if you get on the rest of academia, no one takes this seriously.
Yeah. This goes back to the point I was going to make. Basically, like every organization, every sort of public gathering, every YouTube channel has the words rational, reason, logic, skepticism. It has all these kind of self-aggrandizing words into it. And it becomes comical when you look at the Dunning-Kruger effect, that basically the more competent a person judges themselves, the less competent they are in reality. So all these kind of self-aggrandizing terms that just tell us how rational they think they are actually becomes self-indicting in light of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And as we see from our own experience, the people who talk most about logic are often the people who have the least aptitude for forming logical arguments. In fact, I think a lot of atheists don't even seem to really know what the word logic means. It has a very definite, specific meaning, and they seem to think it's just vague word that means that they're smarter than you somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I get some of that too. I mean, I think it was like 6 or 7 months ago, some guy named Rationality Rules
Yes,
did a response on my free will video, and he basically defined in the video this Newtonian determinism as fatalism. And my jaw dropped when I saw him do that. And I was like, what on earth is he doing? And here he is pretending he's like this expert on free will and determinism. And I'm like, dude, like that's a pretty bad mistake to make. Did you even Google the terms?
yeah. I mean, there were like a guy I know. Certainly, you've had your share of run-ins with TMM. I mean, he made video.
Yeah.
He said if God created the world, then he must be a force, and there are 4 fundamental forces, so God would have to be a 5th. I was like, what? God would have to be a 5th fundamental force of physics? What? No, God created the laws of physics.
It's like
he will lead you on like a wild goose chase after that, so you'll never get around to the original point.
It's like arguments that atheist philosophers would just make fun of. It's like this is not something that you would find published in any book by a philosopher of religion.
Yeah,
it's like this can only come from the minds of people sitting in armchairs who need to look up, like actually just read a book. I mean, like, I understand I'm not the smartest guy out there, but at least I try my best to follow what I read in the literature.
Yes. And it goes back to the Christ mythers. I actually think this whole posture of being the rational, logical, reasonable superiors, they're actually kind of shooting themselves in the feet, because when you've determined that rationality is basically interchangeable with atheism, and that everything you already believe is the most possible rational thing you could possibly believe, why would you? And at the same time, you claim that you're completely open to evidence, and you will follow the evidence wherever it leads. Why would you even try to look at? Why would you even try to investigate any other ideas if you've already determined that believing that Jesus of Nazareth never existed is the most rational thing to believe? You're not going to follow the evidence where it leads, because why would you investigate what you have already determined to be an irrational conclusion? So they've kind of rationalized, so to speak, their complete closed-mindedness.
Oh yeah, in a lot of ways, it's really unfortunate. And I tell people all the time, if you want to debunk Christianity, it's quite simple. Watch my Resurrection series, offer a better explanation of all the data, and then you will start converting people away from Christianity. But what do I get? You just go read the comment sections. Well, you don't have any physical proof.
Yeah.
Well, I want to see a picture. Well, I mean, this is not real evidence. I'm like, okay, well, then it should be easy to debunk. And no one takes me up on the challenge. No one will go through the evidence and say, okay, well, here, I think this is better explained in this way, and this theory I'm offering can also better explain this fact. It provides illumination here. It's least ad hoc because of this. No one does that. Everyone just says, well, this isn't real evidence, because just because some guy wrote it down, that doesn't mean it's true. And I'm like, look at the quality of what they're saying. Look at what scholars say about these facts. Look at how they have to try. I mean, Gerd Ludemann has to invent these wild theories about Paul's early life in order to explain away his conversion. This is something scholars take very seriously when they study this. This is not, and then you see atheist laymen. So this is nothing. I'm like, that's like, what are the actual scholars saying on this? I mean, even Jeff Lauder, who's one of the co-founders of Infidel, said, I remember thinking to myself that if I took the time to investigate the resurrection, I could make anyone who believed it look like a fool. Or so I thought. I was about to discard it as another illogical religious belief, and yet I found it extremely difficult to deal with as a skeptic. So even he admits, when you start diving into the evidence, it's not that easy just to dismiss. You actually have to look at the evidence and go through it.
Yeah, that's remarkable. Yeah. But yeah, I was going to say something. Yeah, they use all this kind of self-aggrandizing language, and you were talking about the lack of substance in the comments. It's never worse than when like a guy like some YouTube atheist with a rabid following six their followers onto your channel. Then like all the comments are just like, LOL, you are so dumb. Ha ha ha, I am laughing at your stupidity. Ha, you are so dumb. It's just like they're not even making an attempt at making a counter argument.
No, and just let them do it. It's just at the end of the day, they're the ones who are just going to look stupid, and the theists will look much better because we're the ones going to the scholars, we're the ones quoting the papers, we're the ones who are making coherent arguments and trying our best to be respectful, even though I fail at that plenty of times. But
Yeah,
that's, I mean, that's what we have to do because at the end of the day, that's what's going to stand, not a bunch of trolling comments or
yeah,
trolling videos throwing out about as much swear words as you possibly can.
yeah. I mean, it's so embarrassing. It's such a bad look for them. It seems like to them, it's just like it will forever be like 2006, and the whole world has moved on. People are discussing interesting things. I mean, you go into the comments section of, I don't agree with everything he says, obviously, but go into the comments section of like a Jordan Peterson video. People are actually like discussing ideas. They actually are having interesting discussions about art and philosophy and ideas. They could talk about like Carl Jung or Carlos Castaneda or whatever. And then like you go to like the atheists are still ha 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 invisible sky fairy. It's like, dudes,
Yeah, I mean,
it just gets stultifying, and I'm not sure they realize how completely regressive they seem. That they're just kind of banding about these kind of stultifying, boring memes from 2006.
well, it's like if they keep mocking it, people will just think they're smart, and that's
Yeah,
not how it works. It's that seems to be a lot of just because someone believes in a god, they're like, well, that's silly, that's stupid. We're just gonna mock you because we've moved past that. And I'm like, are you like real? Like, you do realize the majority of people still believe in God? It's not like these are just minority fringe groups out in the abyss somewhere around the planet. Most people believe in God. So, and yet you're this tiny minority who's constantly trying to attack the majority. That's not going to look good. I mean, sure, maybe you're right, but make a coherent argument. Don't just
yeah.
mock.
They kind of speak out of both sides of their mouth. I've found. I've talked about this. I think I've kind of figured out why. You will find a lot of times the atheists will kind of describe themselves as being kind of this aggrieved minority where they're just all these Christian bigots surround them and they're not free to express what they're saying, and they're just so put upon living in American society or whatnot. At other moments, they are the kind of triumphal superiors who are just kind of bemused at our backwards superstitious thinking, and are just kind of like out of their own kind of magnanimousness are not just like keeping us as pets or something. I don't know. So they kind of do both. And I figured out how they do it, because when they speak from the vantage point of the superiors, they are speaking from the vantage point of their future supremacy, of the majority that they will hold in the future, of which they are just on the vanguard right now. So that is when atheism gets totally vindicated in the future, they will look back at us and see us as these backwards kind of brutes.
Yeah, there's no evidence that's ever going to happen. Even researchers like evolutionary biologist Michael Bloom has written a lot on the advantages of religiosity, and he says like it's evolutionary. Evolution selects for it because religious people have far more kids, so it selects for it for reproductive benefits. So he argues that religion is so ingrained in humanity because it helps encourages reproduction. So I mean, if you look at who's having more kids, it's always religious people. And I think sociologists at this point are even predicting atheism to decline over the next 100 years, whereas religion is going to keep growing. And if you look at what's going on in science with the holographic principle and the simulation theory, that's not boding well for atheism in the long run. I mean, if physicists are getting up on stage like Professor James Gates, who has said when he was being interviewed on stage by Neil deGrasse Tyson that if the simulation hypothesis is true, it opens the door to resurrection and eternal life.
Yes.
Physicists are on stage saying this about the simulation hypothesis. And last year, we got physical evidence in an actual peer-reviewed study that the holographic principle is true. So if that's where we're going, that's not going to bode well for atheism over the next 100 years.
Yeah, it seems like physics is poised to just keep getting more and more interesting, while atheists cling to their kind of 19th century materialism.
It really is at this point, because the best arguments for God's existence have come about with the advances of science: Big Bang cosmology, fine tuning, quantum mechanics. These all came about within the past 100 years. Most of the arguments I use are based upon data within the past 100 years. So science isn't burying God. Science is lending more evidence to the existence of God.
Now, can you describe what that evidence for the holographic universe is?
Sure. So let me pull up my notes here. But so basically, so the holographic principle is this idea that all of three-dimensional space can be encoded on sort of like a two-dimensional surface. And so the three-dimensional universe,
it's like a compactification, yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a projection of that distant data. So basically what a lot of people argue is that, basically we're just a three-dimensional hologram of sort of this underlying information processing. So I mean, that's kind of what's been going on lately. And so last year there was a study, they looked at the cosmic microwave background radiation, and they looked into it a little bit here and there, and they found that a lot of the early evidence in the cosmic microwave background radiation is compatible with the holographic principle, and in some ways more so than the standard model. I can't find my notes here. Let me keep looking for them because I wrote a bunch of stuff down on this for a video later this summer. But so basically, there's a lot of actual evidence for here it is. So basically, there seems to be a lot of there's a peer-reviewed study in 2017, and they looked at irregularities in the background radiation, and their team found that simple equations of quantum field theory could explain almost all the cosmological observations, and it is marginally a better fit than the standard model, where quantum field theory becomes it's a tongue twister. So it's not in some ways the standard model is better, but in some ways the holographic model is a little bit better. So we actually have a little bit of evidence now the holographic principle is very compatible with the physical evidence we see in the cosmic microwave background radiation.
So yeah, it's hard for me to grasp how this would be an alternative to the standard model rather than just kind of a value-added standard model.
Say that again?
It's just not like our understanding of the standard model is incomplete. It's like saying, Euclidean geometry isn't wrong. There's just a whole other dimension to it we don't understand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have to try to rectify gravity with quantum mechanics because those are our two theories of the universe.
As a standard model, yeah.
Yeah, well, where physics is going right now is we are saying gravity is emergent from an underlying quantum realm. We at this point, Sean Carroll said in a lecture, he's like, space is obviously not fundamental. Space is just sort of like an emergent construct from the underlying Hilbert space, which is Hilbert space is just mass speak for it's not really actual real space. So, and if Einstein is correct, space and time are one. Space-time is emergent from underlying information processing. Well, that sounds a lot like what theists have been saying for 2,000 years.
But if you go to the top of Sean Carroll's website, it says there's nothing but atoms and void.
Yeah, I don't understand why he has that up there, because he has said in lectures that space is obviously not fundamental. If space is not fundamental, then the matter in space is emergent as well, because space-time and matter are intricately connected. You can't have matter if you don't have space to put it in.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, just this. I'm trying to remember the name of the study, but I mean, they basically looked at non-perturbative aspects of the quantum field of the cosmic microwave background radiation, and it found it completely compatible with the holographic principle. So we're moving in that direction, and that's not going to bode well for atheism, and as me and many others have been arguing for the past, and it's not just me arguing. I mean, the physicists like Stephen Barr have published books on this. Like, he published a great book called Modern Physics and Ancient Faith, where he argues that the evidence in science is strongly confirming ancient faith. So this is coming from an actual physicist at this point.
What was the famous quote? I think it was from like Robert Millikan or something. It says, physicists finally scale the mountain of human knowledge and find the theologians have been sitting there for millennia.
Yeah, it's they find that the theologians have been there the whole time. Yeah, I know. It was in one of the early editions of his book. I think in the later editions he removed it, unfortunately. But yeah, that's one thing. I mean, even Mikio Kaku is talking about a lot of this stuff as well. A lot of physicists are now. So physicists are talking about this. This isn't just apologist speak. We're quoting physicists a lot of times.
Now, clear this up for me because I'm when we talk about the holographic universe, that is something that is separate from and it is not necessarily entailed by the quote unquote simulation hypothesis, correct?
Well, the simulation hypothesis is just the idea that the universe is basically like a simulation. Some take it further and say, yes, we actually are a simulation on some advanced society's computer. And Brian Whitworth has said that in one of his papers. He says this is most likely. Of course, there was the whole philosophical argument.
I'm not a big fan of that. Yes.
Nick Bostrom's simulation argument. So, the holographic principle would be part of that whole theory. It would be compatible with it, and it would support the simulation hypothesis in the long run. Now, a lot of theists and I have argued that it's actually a simpler explanation just to look at theism instead of positing a whole nother universe and society out there. It's far simpler just to posit a mind. And if you look at how quantum field theory correlates with quantum cognition, it actually starts to line up. So I'll be doing a video on this in July probably. But yeah, I don't take the actual hardcore simulation argument that we are actually a simulation on society's advanced computer just 50 years in the future. So some actually do, though. Some philosophers do take that view.
Well, there are giant conceptual problems with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just simpler. I talk about it in my digital physics argument. It's far simpler just to posit one mind, a necessary mind, which is coherent with the other arguments we have from natural theology. So it explains far more with far less.
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense for me just for mind to be primary in the universe. It is actually a very intuitive concept, being a non-expert as I am. And it seems almost in reaction to this, atheists have reflexively just dumbed down the idea of God to the invisible man in the sky. So something completely non-intuitive just to kind of weasel out of that, it seems.
Yeah, and a lot of the comments I get, well, this still doesn't prove Jesus is God. I'm like, I never said that. That seems to be the number one comment I've been getting lately on my arguments for God's existence. This still doesn't prove. God, yeah, well, which God? Well, no one claimed it was a certain God. We have other arguments for that.
Yeah. I actually did a video called Hacking Atheism where I took on the which God rejoinder and it seems to play into a whole bunch of other kind of atheist misconceptions, like I just go one God further, and so there are kind of variants on the theme. But yeah, it's like no, you can't prove God unless you somehow systematically exclude every other interpretation of God, which is not the standard we use for anything.
No, it's ridiculous. I don't see how that would even address the argument. It doesn't actually even address the argument.
It's not sequitur, yeah.
Yeah. I was debating Corey Markham, I think a year and a half ago, maybe it was just a year ago. But I debated him on the resurrection argument. And most of the time, he just kind of kept bringing up other miracles. Like, do you believe that the Salem witch trials really had witches? Do you believe these claims by Tacitus that Vespasian really healed someone? And I'm like, I said, this doesn't support your atheism at all. At anything, you're just proving the supernatural is more real, even if these were actual real miracle claims.
Yeah.
That's just shooting yourself in the foot in the long run.
Yeah. And by so and they expect that you're affirming this, you're necessarily disputing everything else, and that you would have to incur a burden of proof for why you don't believe in this or this miraculous claim or this God or whatever. And it's like, no, I never claim those things. I don't have the burden of proving these things. They think it's very hard to explain their thought processes, but yeah.
Yeah, it's
all been absorbed. It's just like this body of folk wisdom that they've just kind of accumulated.
It's a lot of times just trying to throw whatever you can against the wall and see if it'll stick. Like there's an atheist who responded to my quantum videos. His name is the Polymath, and I responded to him in my blog, and it was like I if you go watch his videos, I encourage people to, because I think they're great. That's the best response they can come up with. He's just throwing whatever he can against the wall to see if it'll stick. In one video, he's trying to take Victor Stanger's arguments. In another video, he's trying to argue for quantum Bayism, which is not going to help him in the long run because that's a anti-realist view. And so I was like, are you just throwing whatever you can against the wall to see if it'll stick? And this is not going to address my challenge, which is offer the best explanation of the data. And to this day, I still don't see that when it comes to the arguments for God's existence. It's just, let's see if we can poke as many holes in it and hope it sinks.
Yeah.
Well, even if yet the holes are great holes, that still is not offering a better boat to get across the river in. So we still have the best explanation of the data, even if your holes were successful.
Yeah. Well, what you said reminded me of an old time. I don't even know if he still exists anymore, but an old timer, a YouTuber, and I've completely forgot about him. I completely blocked him out of my mind until someone mentioned him recently on like the Escaping Atheism Facebook page or something. But Dortapan.
Oh no, he's still around. He changed his name. He's like Eccentric or Electric Media or something now.
Okay. I don't really care. His videos gave me a splitting headache, but it's like anything, just by hook or by crook, he would literally be flinging stuff against the wall if he and it was all just stupid. Every single argument he gave was stupid and flawed, and then you almost had to admire his tenacity in just trying to get rid of God by hook or by crook. And Richard Carrier kind of reminded of Richard Carrier in the same way too, because there's actually something kind of like perversely endearing about just his determination just to get rid of Jesus just by hook or by crook. You know, it's if one thing doesn't work, it's going to be another thing. But yeah.
Well, yeah, look at this alleged pagan deities he brings up that supposedly resurrected.
Yeah.
I mean, no, none of them, like Romulus, no, he did not resurrect. He was taken up in a whirlwind, according to Livy and Plutarch, and according to Dionysius, he just died. So that's not a resurrection, and if anything, it's a parallel to Elijah. And then like Zaloximos. Well, no one ever says Zaloximos was resurrected. It says that when the Thracians die, they believe they take up residence in another world. That sounds more like what Socrates believed, if anything.
Yeah.
Inanna was not resurrected. Inanna went down in her full form to the underworld to conquer it, was killed, and then hung up on a hook, and then she came back to life, and she had to get someone to replace her in the underworld so she could come back up and rule. If that's the best you can come up with, that's nothing. Like you can make anything a parallel if you just change the meaning, and that's all that is.
Or just flat out lie.
Yeah. I mean, like with Osiris. Osiris was resurrected. No, he wasn't. He was resurrected in an Egyptian sense, but the Egyptians and the Jews define their words differently. Osiris just had to live in the underworld forever, and he became Lord of the Dead. He never returned to a physical existence up in Egypt.
Mm. I'm reminded of like there was some. I don't know if it was like the Golden Bough or something, some book from the 19th century that atheists continually make reference to, but it's a very rare book. It's like if you're going to like find it in a library, you'd probably have to go to some university library, go to their special book section where you're not allowed to check out the books.
Oh, I've done that.
Find it there, so it's completely inaccessible, kind of conveniently inaccessible, and yet atheists continue basically to reference this book.
Yeah, I mean they reference a lot of books from the 19th century, specifically Christmithers do. Like Remsburg still comes up, and I'm like, really? We're doing the Remsburg list? Okay, here we go. So it's like you can't use an argument from silence. Historians laugh at that. I remember Tim McGrew was in his lectures was citing all these examples of argument from silence, like Marco Polo never mentions the Great Wall of China. Ulysses S. Grant never mentions the Emancipation Proclamation. It's like, are we going to say that they didn't think these things existed? No, that's arguing from silence. And I like to just throw this out. I mean, Richard Dawkins never mentions Herbert Hoover.
Yeah.
Clearly he doesn't think he existed, right? And they always say, no, he was talking about different subjects. And I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Bam.
Move on.
Yes. And they say, no, talking donkeys, talking snakes, pull the escape hatch.
Yeah.
Get sucked down, yeah.
Interesting. There actually is archaeological evidence for Balaam. There's something called the Deir Allah inscription from about the 8th or 9th century. I mean, it's obviously long after Balaam existed, but it says, it's from the Canaanite perspective. It says that Balaam was mourning because a god named El Shaddai brought him a prophecy that there was going to be destruction coming to his people. So, that's pretty good. So, I mean, I just throw that out there if it's sort of like a side note type thing, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. Who's Balaam again?
Balaam in Numbers 22 is the talking donkey guy.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know what that referred to. Okay.
Oh, in Numbers 22, like a Canaanite prophet, God comes to him and says, you need to go pronounce prophecy upon your people that destruction is coming. So he rides, and there's this incident where, he meets God on the road, and his donkey throws him off, and he hits his donkey. So the God allows the donkey to talk. So, on that type of thing. So it's something like that. I mean, it'd be a miracle, obviously, because literally the angel of the Lord, who would be the prefiguration of Christ, is there and preventing the donkey from going anywhere. So it's be under a miracle.
Yeah, it is by its very nature an anomalous occurrence. Yes.
Right. I mean, no one's saying that was just a natural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Even the snake in Genesis has been argued very well by Michael Heiser. This is a divine being. It's a serpentine divine being.
Yes, of having the qualities of a serpent, which are
right. Well, all seraphim are serpents. All seraphim in the Bible, even the good ones, are serpents. Yeah.
I doubt even atheists know what they're referring to when they talk about talking donkey. I'm sure they don't, but yeah, and a lot of times is that they will mock these things on the basis of already assuming materialism.
Yeah, that's the main argument. We've already assumed naturalism is true. Therefore, any evidence that goes against naturalism has to be false. The end.
Yeah,
that's not how this works. If that is true, offer a theory to explain the resurrection argument, for example, on naturalistic terms that is least ad hoc, the most plausible, has explanatory scope, explanatory power, and can provide illumination. And they don't do this. They don't take up the challenge as much as I bicker on about it.
Yes. Geez, I kind of ran out of gas here.
Well, I mean, we go for about an hour, so I mean, we've been talking about a lot of things. But anything else you want to ask me? I have upcoming videos. I might be interviewing John Walton, upcoming, because a lot of people have been asking me to do a video on the flood. We just released a book on the flood, and because I'm not ready to do a video on it, I might just interview him next month, and we'll talk about his upcoming book. Things like that are coming up on my channel.
Okay. Anything else?
More videos on quantum mechanics coming up in the next couple months. I'm going to do a critique of Bohmian mechanics in April. People have been requesting that, which is funny because that's William Lane Craig's favorite theory and interpretation of the quantum mechanical world. And a lot of atheists are now retreating to that. Like the guy named Chocolate Hat tried to respond to my series on quantum mechanics using Bohmian mechanics. And I'm like, do you realize what you're doing here? Even if you're right, you're falling right into William Lane Craig's camp. So that should be interesting. But
just tell them what is the most anti-Christian thing you could possibly believe in.
It's really funny that when my arguments are annoying atheists so much, they have to retreat to William Lane Craig. That was the funniest thing I've seen in a while.
Yes. And your the Encyclopedia of Apologetics, what?
Yeah, we're going to keep building videos for the apologetic video library.
Yes.
Finish up some arguments for God's existence. Next year around this time, I hope to start a series on Genesis, go through each chapter, try to do one video on each chapter. I may have to do two on some, but just start going straight through the Bible, go up and do evidence for the Exodus, evidence for the Canaanite conquest, things like that. So, I mean, I'm finish up my original series. I'll get to the problem of evil, problem of divine hiddenness, and then I'll just start going straight up through the Old Testament.
Excellent. Dude, your efforts are greatly appreciated, and God bless you and everything you're doing. Please, everyone, check out and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'm sure probably a good chunk of my subscribers already are subscribed to you. But check out Inspiring Philosophy, one of the best channels on YouTube, in my opinion. And anything else you want to say?
No, yeah, I appreciate having me on. I love being interviewed to help other channels grow. But yeah, I'll just, if you have stuff you want me to help promote, send it my way. I'd be happy to post it on my Facebook page.
Sure thing, and thanks a lot for doing this. And
yeah, no worries.
Have a good night.
Thanks. I'll talk to you later.
See you.
Okay, bye.